welcome to MOOC on Human Rights in India. In this module, we will take up the National Commission for Safai Karamcharis. Before we go further, I'd like to outline the learning objectives for this module. We will first learn what is meant by the term manual scavenging and also see what are the human rights violations faced by people who are forced to engage in manual scavenging, and what have been the legislative interventions that were made by the Parliament of India to address the issue of manual scavenging. And we will also look at the structure, mandate of the National Commission for Safai Karamcharis, and also a critical appraisal of this National Commission. What is meant by this term manual scavenging? In fact, it relates to the absence of poor flesh or water-based latrines. Here, three things are involved: a human being with a broom and a tin plate and a drum removes human excreta, carries it on his or her head and dumps it at a dumping site far away, and it's a hereditary occupation. And as you know, our caste system or a caste structure is rigid, and there is a hierarchy in the social structure, and particularly the so-called lower segment of the Dalits have been forced to be in this degrading, dehumanizing practice, and in fact no tangible efforts were made to improve the sanitation to enable people to come out of this effort for many centuries. In this caste system itself, if you see, there is a reference to the ritual purity, about the roles, about the occupations performed by groups, and based on that, there have been placed either above or below. And just because there are people who are engaged in some unclean occupations, they face social exclusion, they are not allowed to participate in all activities of the community, and the very nature of this activity leads to many health complications, hazardous infections to the skin of the people, to the eyes, to the liver, to the gastrointestinal system, and to the respiratory tract, and many other infections. So one can imagine the human rights violations faced by these communities who have been forced by the rest of the society to persist in these activities. Now let us come to the legislative intervention made by the Parliament of India. In fact, there was this Protection of Civil Rights Act of 1955. It was amended in the year 1976, and a section 7A was inserted in the Protection of Civil Rights Act. What does this amendment say? It goes like this: whoever compels a person who on account of untouchability is forced to do scavenging, is compelled to do scavenging, this act has been criminalized. This amendment seeks to punish any person who forces another on account of untouchability to do scavenging with an imprisonment for a particular term. This was followed by another legislation in the year 1993 called Employment of Manual Scavengers and Construction of Dry Latrines Prohibition Act. The preamble of this act refers to the dehumanizing practice and the need to eliminate it and the need to punish those who use manual scavengers, and also to have a uniform law across the country for preventing the construction of dry latrines and also for the rehabilitation of the manual scavengers. The National Human Rights Commission, recognizing this as a very serious affront to human dignity, took up this issue. And in fact, the National Human Rights Commission, as you know, was also constituted in the year 1993, and it asked the Government of India to issue a gazette notification to enable this Employment of Manual Scavengers and Construction of Dry Latrines Act to be notified. And in fact, this notification is important for several reasons. It is for giving effect to the or entry into the force of this act, and also the NHRC urged the central government to frame rules under the act. Many states have denied the existence of manual scavenging. They did not take necessary efforts to bring a legislation in their respective states. Safai Karamchari Andolan, a non-governmental organization, filed a public interest litigation in the Supreme Court of India, drawing its attention to this grave, inhuman, degrading practice of manual scavenging. And this led to denials, counter affidavits from number of states, and in the face of important evidence adduced by the Safai Karamchari Andolan by way of photographs, by way of other documentary evidence, this has led to some improvements, and this has led to actions on the part of the center as well as the states. This matter is still continuing in the Supreme Court of India. In the year 2011, housing census brought to the fore a very serious issue, and it mentioned that there are 26 lakh insanitary latrines in the country, and it also drew public attention to the fact that there are people who are being engaged as manual scavengers to clean these insanitary latrines. And in the wake of this damning revelations in the 2011 housing census, the Parliament came out in the year 2013 a new legislation on the prohibition of employment of manual scavengers and their Rehabilitation Act. Here the emphasis is both prohibition of the employment of manual scavenging as well as the rehabilitation of the those involved in the manual scavenging. Here, for the first time, the terms manual scavenging has been widely defined in order to cover sewers and other forms of insanitary latrines going beyond the traditionally understood dry latrines. And there have been many new features which have been brought in under this act. A National Commission for Safai Karamchari was also given a very clear mandate. the National Commission for Safai Karamchari Act was passed in the year 1993. Under this act, the commission was constituted in the year 1994, initially for a period of 3 years. The expectation was that the commission would achieve its objectives in a short span of 3 years, but if you look at the current situation, even after more than 25 years after the adoption of this legislation, the manual scavenging is still a reality. So that's how the commission was extended for a period of 3 years each. And in the year 2004, the National Commission for Safai Karamchari Act lapsed. As a result, today the National Commission for Safai Karamcharis is a non-statutory body under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, and its mission is to eliminate this dehumanizing practice of manual scavenging, and it has been given a number of functions. In fact, I draw your attention to the following graphic. National Commission for Safai Karamcharis is expected to recommend to the central government a specific program of action towards elimination of inequalities in status, facilities and opportunities for Safai Karamcharis, study and evaluate the implementation of the programs and schemes relating to the social and economic rehabilitation of Safai Karamcharis and scavengers. In particular, investigate specific grievances and to take suo motu notice of matters relating to non-implementation of programs or schemes in respect of any group of Safai Karamcharis, decisions or guidelines or instructions, measures for social and economic upliftment of Safai Karamcharis, oversee the implementation of the National Action Plan for total eradication of manual scavenging, make periodical reports to the central governments and state governments on any matter concerning Safai Karamcharis. The Commission has also been entrusted with the task of monitoring the implementation of the Prohibition of Employment as Manual Scavengers and the Rehabilitation Act 2013. As per Section 31(1) of the said Act, the Commission shall perform the following functions, namely to monitor the implementation of the Act, to inquire into complaints regarding contravention of the provisions of the Act, and to convey its findings to the concerned authorities with recommendations requiring further action, and to advise the central and state governments for effective implementation of the provisions of the Act, and to take suo motu notice of matters relating to non-implementation of the Act. In the discharge of its above mentioned functions, the Commission have the powers to call for information with respect to any matter specified above from any government or local or other authority. Now let's come to the assessment of the National Commission for Safai Karamcharis. It faces a number of challenges relating to staffing, staff shortages, funding. For instance, when you see that there are 26 lakh insanitary latrines identified in the 2011 housing census, you can't keep a meager 4 crore amount for the rehabilitation of people engaged in manual scavenging. Third, the lapsing of the National Safai Karamchari Commission's Act in the year 2004 and the lack of quasi-judicial powers, and it being a non-statutory body is unable to enforce its decisions, unable to get its action implemented by the concerned state governments or the central departments. There is yet another major problem with the annual reports, which are often delayed. People say that there are just achievements and activities of the Commission rather than recommendations for a framework of action by other actors. Here, are very, very profound issues involving extreme form of untouchability, a dehumanizing, a degrading practice, a hereditary occupation, and here is a body which has been constituted to monitor the implementation of the relevant legislation, but without proper powers, without proper funding, without proper manpower and other resources. There is still a long way to go to secure the rights of people who have been forced to persist in this heinous occupation, and there's a need for all sections of the society to be vigilant and to confront these grave human rights violations. See you in the next module. Thank you.